in the sophomore cap school of the arts.
My name is Tucker Parvin. I'm a rising senior at Academe of the Oaks.
My name is Tyler, and I'm going to 8th grade. And we are Team Ius Civile, which is Civil Rights in Latin. And our topic was the Center for Civil and Human Rights, and our angle was the excitement about the opening of the center, which occurred earlier this week. So we made a video and we wrote an article, and we made a lovely website that included a lovely Twitter feed. So we will start off with the article.
We separated the article into parts, and my part was about the museum itself. So the museum is 43,000 square feet. They're planning on enlarging it and adding 2 more wings on either side. And the land that it rests on was donated by the Coca-Cola company, and it's also very close to the world of Coca-Cola and the aquarium. The architecture is really symbolic. There's wood panelings that are different colors on the outside, and those represent the joining of hands. It's kind of a more avant-garde than most centers. Lots of exhibits. One of the exhibits is Rolls Down Like Water, which is about the American Civil and Human Rights Museum. And so it takes you through the history of it. It focuses mainly on Atlanta, but it really is about the whole country. And you can hear stories by people who are in the movement. And one of the really, I think, most powerful things is there's an exhibit where you can sit at a counter like they would have had, and you can sort of put your hands on the table and listen with headphones. And people, and it would be like you were at a sit-in and a silent protest. And people would be threatening you, and the chairs would shake as they pushed the chairs. And so I thought that was a really powerful moment, because you really felt the suffering that those people felt.
And it's a very personal moment that you have when you sit down and listen to threats that people give you as
Yeah, I couldn't take it. I
Yeah,
like 20 seconds.
I meant it like maybe 50 seconds. But it's not really part of this exhibit, but it's sort of a similar theme, is they have a collection from the Morehouse archives of Dr. Martin Luther King's personal belongings and his school papers and sermons. One thing that caught my eye was he got a C in public speaking. I thought that was interesting. And then another exhibit is called Spark of Conviction, which is about sort of the entire movement on a global scale, not just for civil rights, but also for human rights. And it's also more of a modern feeling to it. It talks about different countries and the civil rights problems that they're facing in those countries.
my part of this project was about the people who made this happen, like the people who participated in developing the center, such as CEO and President Doug Shipman, Miss Deborah, right there. She's the Vice President. And Andrew Young and Evelyn Lowry, they made this happen because they raised the idea of the center. And basically, it's a very personal moment that you have at the center, because it shows different types of exhibits that show probably never get to see at other centers and museums. So I thought that was very interesting.
And last is my article. My part was about this actual location of the center and why they actually chose Atlanta. And the reason they chose it was like it's sorry, it's Atlanta has been like historically like the center of like civil rights stuff. Like Martin Luther King was born here. He like his church was here, and like a lot of things that related to the civil rights movement was here. And we have like Auburn Avenue, like just things that were like relate to the civil rights movement. And I think that Atlanta was like the ideal place for the center. And what was the next one? And how like Atlanta's like international. Like we have like the biggest airport in the entire world, so people from all over the world come here. So that's why we have a human rights part in the center, because people from all over the world can see it because they're involved in it. And in addition to our article, we made a lovely video.
Very lovely.
Yeah.
Quite a long time to like edit it, so
A total of 2 days.
2 days.
And in order to get this video done, we actually got like early access passes. So we went the week before it actually opened. So like the week later, we saw CNN the footage that we got a week early, and we were like, yes.
Flawless.
So we felt kind of special, but so we made this awesome video. I'm gonna play it.
Atlanta, Atlanta, that's my hometown, Atlanta.
4 design minds and their team members were the ones who envisioned how we told the story. And I think that their storytelling, combined with all the work we did to get authentic stories from people who were in the movement and from SNCC, from the HBCUs, from Atlanta, from elsewhere, human rights defenders today, all of those stories came into the process. And then those design minds said, this is how you tell it to an audience who's walking through a museum facility. That all came together to be what you see.
I like the layout of it. I like how it was very categorized for what was going on at the time. And I noticed, like, as you go, I think it's like a lot more optimistic for the future. So I like it. That was what I was.
I'm encouraged that the city of Atlanta has finally built a civil and human rights museum, something to honor the many people in the Atlanta area, not just Martin Luther King, but there were so many people instrumental in the civil rights movement from the Atlanta area. I think children, even young babies, can start to learn.
And we also hope that it will serve as a wonderful affirmation to those persons who are now older, who are actually part of the movement, to see that their history is being preserved.
I'm always moved whenever I'm in the presence of artifacts that relate to Dr. King. He is continually the standard bearer for those of us who are concerned about how we make our lives matter.
I also think the space where they had sitting at the counter where you could put your hands down there and you could actually hear the suffering, the beating and the dogs and the commands that were given. I think that's one of the things that kind of touched me.
I think a lot of times we get kind of caught up thinking because there's a black, president, that racism is over, or that, true freedom has been achieved. And that's a misconception. I think that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's well within inside the museum. So I think that's something that'll empower people out here.
I think they can expect something personal. They meet a lot of people when they go through the exhibitions, and they hear personal stories from people. So it's not just about issues or places or dates in history, but they actually hear personal connection stories. I think they can expect to have a connection to something very personal, so they can see themselves in the story, or they can see something that they're very familiar with in the story. And then I think they can also expect to be inspired. Overall, the design of the place, the way that it's laid out, the storytelling, is really meant to inspire them to go wherever they live and to do something. So I think they can expect, in some ways, to be challenged, but also in some ways to be empowered to go do what they want to do.
And singing the words of the old Negro spirit, free at last, take for the money, free
covering this and getting inside before anybody else and kind of going through the exhibition, people who have gone through it this week have talked about how emotional it is and the emotional impact. How did that impact you and the story that you ultimately told? Because it is a very emotional experience when you get in there.
Well, I think as journalists, we're supposed to try our best to be objective, but with something like this, you can get away from getting a little bit emotional about everything. So I think the fact that we tried our hardest to portray sort of the power and intensity of the experience that you would get in this museum, I think it did the job better than it could have if we were being objective.
I actually, like, there was like a part where you could like actually meet people. They like mugshots of people, and they had like, you could like pick up like a phone and you could talk, like you can hear them talking about their experience. And it was just, cause like they were young, like a little older than me when this happened. So it was really, really legal. Like I follow somebody on Instagram that's the same age as them when they were like through this. So it was kind of, it was personal, it was like real.
Well, I think I had a very hard time trying to keep my emotions in during this experience, and it was very personal, like I said. And it was very
Well, I think it's a great question, and I'm wondering, what did you learn these 3 weeks about when you're writing or doing video? How do you acknowledge that your emotions are present and at the same time do your job of reporting? What have you learned about how to balance that or how to acknowledge it?
I think, well, like usually I just say that it was emotional, but I don't say the emotions that I felt. I just say like when you go there, you're gonna feel something. Just make like, I don't say what I felt personally there.
I have a question. Can you explain the Twitter feed on the right side column of the screen?
Well, we set up the Twitter feed from the website, and it allows us to track all posts made with the hashtag NCCHR, which is National Center for Civil Human Rights. So when you visit the website at teamcivilrights.voxmediacafe.com, you can use that to follow whatever news you want to get that you don't get from the website. And we also have, if you go to the home page, we also have a poll where you can say if you're excited about the center or no, if you haven't even heard about it. So.
Hey guys. I was just wondering, like, you know, y'all went in early or whatever, so did you have to, like, keep the video, I forgot if y'all told me this or not, so I'm just wondering, if you guys had to keep the video, like, off the web until it opened?
Well, they didn't tell us we had to. We
So,
weren't technically supposed to be taking video inside the exhibits, but we got special permission to take video inside the exhibits. And the only exhibit that we couldn't film or photograph was the Dr. King collection.
So if you really like this website, there's a thing up there about us that tells about the amazing writers who actually created this.
Wow.
Another question.
Did you learn anything that you had not heard of before?
I learned a lot of stories that I never learned about in school, lots of names that I didn't know. And it really, it's just such a wider scope than a lot of people tend to think.
I did also, and like you can actually feel what they felt when you picked up the phone where you hear their experience by the bus and how they felt about it.
I saw like there were like televisions, like very everywhere. And on some of them, they had like speeches given by segregationists, like who had like were in office, like governors and senators, and they had videos of like the actual like they had like the big water hoses and they were spraying people. They had like bombings going off. It was like everything. And this the one thing I learned, everybody knows about the Freedom Rider thing, but like I actually like learned like where they went, what happened at each little stop, and like who was there, what happened, and why, sort of. And then just cause like they didn't write that in my history book. So.
Yes.
I was watching the coverage of this article on the news, and there was one statement made that some people thought it might be a little too violent for younger children. What is your take on that?
Well, we spoke with the CEO, particularly about the sit-in part, whether the language was the PG version, and he said, what I personally thought was really interesting, he said that it is the PG version, but if you had what would have been said, it would sort of break the suspension of disbelief, and people would start to question whether they thought that that was acceptable, and it would pull them out of the experience.
Last question.
I know the center, one of the intents of the center is to link it with other human rights struggles and history across the world. What did you learn just by touring the museum of other human rights movements around the world?
The first two levels are like about like what we generally hear about like the civil rights in America. But on the top level, it's about like civil rights struggles everywhere, and that's not in my history book either. So like I just learned like stuff going on in like Africa, like Asia, like everywhere is stuff that's like I didn't even know what was happening because I don't really watch the news that much. But I'm gonna have to change that. So yeah, but I just like learned like stuff I wouldn't even expect to be happening. I'm like, well, when did that happen?
Like she said, it's different issues going on in the world, all around the world, and they addressed it at the top level of the center, and it's very optimistic, and I think we should go. Yeah.
$15.
Yeah.
And it has a different approach. It has a different approach on the people that's going there because it like Mr. Hill said in the video, he said it has a different layout and it's very